Okay, thank you for coming today to the Nesco Community Plan Steering Subcommittee meeting of May 19th, 2025. Welcome to everyone. Nancy and Ted are our guests today from the public. And so first I'd like approval from the subcommittee membership of today's agenda, which is
Approved.
Approved.
okay. And so it's been approved. Any conflict of interest declarations today?
No
No
conflicts, Tom said.
None.
Okay, nor mine. Thank you very much. Okay, so there are a number of things here today, and when Sarah gets back, I think we should probably start off with the consultant's comments that we received that we've been pretty baffled by and seem to, well, I'll let her maybe explain how they came about, but they kind of seem to have been written in advance to just shortcut our recommendations in a number of areas. So that's what we'd be seeking some clarification for today. And we will either go through those specific documents, or if you have notes on specific things, subcommittee members could point out some things that seemed a little awkward. So that will be, how do you feel about that as far as getting feedback from Sarah, Lynn, or Tom? Do we want to approach it in a general way or actually get down to specifics?
So two things here. One is I want to be sure that we have some time in this meeting to go through. Lori sent in a really eloquent set of adjustments to the community plan. And Tom,
Right.
I think you sent some as well.
Uh,
Or maybe,
yes,
yeah.
Tom had some comments on my comments not working very well.
Well, so
And he's the editor, so I'm gonna just accept what Tom's perspective is.
yeah, I
as an editor.
included Lori's. I don't recall that I did anything of my own. I just incorporated her comments into the document.
Right.
I just want us to get to our document today in some form after we have the conversation with Sarah. And for Nancy, Nancy, you're on the CAC board. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
as a committee chairperson.
Okay. So the sequence of events here was confusing to me, and we want Sarah to speak to this because, as you'll recall, we worked hard to get a draft on the middle housing piece that we could get into the CAC to vote on. They took a vote, or we were there. They took a vote. I'm not a voter. I don't think I'm a voter, but in any event, CAC took a vote. It then went to LCDC, the Land Conservation Development Commission, and the county. And then at that point, the consultant got involved and a bunch of documents came back to us. And so one of my concerns is the CAC needs to fully understand what it looks like today, because it doesn't look like what it looked like before, number one. And number two is we have been told for the beginning of this process that we would work with a year and a half ago, that we would be working with the consultant on preparing our draft. And just for the record, we have never met the consultant. We have gotten the consultant's comments, but I just think we need to be really clear about what has and hasn't been done so far and who's done it and who embraces it and who doesn't. So that's just a kind of a procedural question, but it's an important one because of course DLCD has a major statutory role here. The county obviously has a role, and we have been trying to keep up, catch up, and exceed expectations at every turn. But I would say, and I would say this if Sarah were with us as well, it's been quite cumbersome. And this middle housing piece, when we got the stuff back from the consultants, there was one page of it where I thought, well, I don't even know why we spent all this time talking about middle housing. Because if we're just going to take residential lots and build quadplexes on them, and if that's the requirement, and that's it, the rest of our requirements stay in place. But there's a long list of things in the attachments that can go on a single family lot in the community boundary area. So, and I think the community needs to be really clear where that decision was made and who made it, and how much latitude we even have under state law to make any impact on that. So I just wanted to get that out on the table before Sarah gets here and explains these documents to us.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm allowed to speak because I'm not a subcommittee member.
You are
for the-
allowed to speak.
Okay. But I hear you guys, and I know the frustration has got to be dealing with all of this and the timelines you're under. And I really just want to say kudos to the committee for trying. I think it'll be helpful to get clarification from Sarah on how much latitude the NCAC has in this effort, since it's statewide, but Tillamook County has hopefully some latitude. And I think you've done your darndest. I would hope that at some point you could meet with the consultants, because the document you've produced has been terrific. And I'm in a quandary because I know it was interim. The first time when we got the
Oh, she
NCAC
froze.
approval to go forward. If it's not editorial, I mean, if it's mainly editorial, you can just go ahead and go forward, I think, with continuing information. But if there's substantive input that changes, then I think it has to be brought back to the NCAC as a whole for input. But yeah, I think it would be really helpful when Sarah comes back to get that clarification. Could you bring the consultants in and talk about it, and what does happen? What latitude do we have? So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but procedurally, I think
Yeah,
it would
I
be
mean,
important
because
to
it's
let the NCAC know that these discussions are happening, that it's, perhaps schedule more feedback sessions if you think that there would be some value.
Problem is, we understand that the feedback sessions would have to occur between now and 10 minutes from now.
Yes, very
Okay.
tight.
Okay, then.
Well, our understanding is that it's going to be imminent that we have to submit this, and yes, that's a problem.
Yeah.
I don't know how to solve that problem.
Yeah. Okay, well,
If we say nothing, we're doing a disservice. If we change anything, we're doing a disservice.
yes. At a minimum, we need a disclaimer
Mhm.
for the subcommittee,
Right.
because I just, I think fairness is really important, and transparency is really important. And when people see that list that is in that one document, I think they'll just be, really? What? Why did we even start this process if we were opening that door? So we'll see when we talk to Sarah. The other thing I just wanted to mention, we requested the map on April 7th. We have not seen the map with the elements we requested yet. It's today's May 19th. Again, I would argue that map should have been where this discussion began over a year ago, and I understand limited resources, but that is another pending piece of work not yet arrived.
You should probably mention what that map is. You just
So
said the map.
The map includes the elements that what we asked for is the map to show within the Nescoin community planning boundary the areas, the lots that are available for middle housing. And once we saw the draft of that map, which was very exciting, on April 7th, I sent Sarah a list and said, okay, so looking at this map, your people need to factor in which of these areas have grandfathered CC&Rs, which areas have sewer and water or not, which areas have H and B, H as in happy, B as in boy, which none of us knew what it meant. It just said H and B. And then we also asked, I think this was Guy or maybe you, Tom, that asked for, with those lots, particularly when we wrote the draft policy, we need to look at those lots with RR, R1, and R3 identified. You know, right now it's a map that shows lots, but it doesn't show the zones. And that matters a lot, as we know from our work building that document. So those things were to be added, and definitely should be added before there are public meetings this summer, because otherwise we'll delay the process even further, because that is what people will want to see, and should be able to see. So, and I still don't know what H and B is. But if any of you have any better guesses than I do, you know, jump on in there. But
Yep.
Happy and boisterous, you know, I just don't know what it is.
Okay.
So
Well,
Tom, should we start with your document while we wait for Sarah, or what would you propose as our?
I think we should do that because we don't know when she's going to be back.
Yeah.
And we want to, that's kind of a priority, even though this other thing is lurking large.
Okay, looks like R15 is the current one, and I'll share that. Let me make it a little bit larger. And should we go to the changes? I assume that that's what you're interested in.
Yeah. Let's see with the Lori's comments.
Okay.
And Tom, did you say this just for the minutes? This is version 13?
15, 1-5.
1-5. Thank you.
Okay, this was a comment in one of them. I don't know.
Oh, that's my comment.
That's your comment, Rand, and that I did put it in there, but I don't really know what to do with that.
Well, it was kind of somewhere between aspirational and an ordinance. So that's kind of one of my problems in reading or composing some of these things. Some, like the fire safety thing, there is an ordinance. I'm not sure why we don't just write an ordinance and have an ordinance for fire safety, but and then this one for landscaping, it might work into Lori's piece because it talks about where landscaping is important and how it can make a difference to soften the impact of buildings and cars. But it was to be discussed, not, it wasn't a finished thing. So
I
know
think
you
I
like
gave you that
finished
opinion.
work.
Yeah, so I think it can be, well, first of all, the ordinances actually don't have to do with fire. Fire is as I understand it, the duty of the fire districts. And our fire district does have rules which they enforce about fire safety. And I sent you a
Okay.
copy of it. And I think it's pretty much the same thing as Nehalem.
Halem, yeah. Okay, well, let's just chuck this then.
Okay, fair enough. I can do that.
You're good at chucking stuff out of here.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, there we go. This is in the section of goals for the future. Since you said that you weren't sure where it goes, I put it where I thought it belonged, which is in
Okay.
goals for the
Good
future.
job.
Okay, and so this is it's probably going to require some smoothing to be able to make this flow better, but as long as we have the concepts down, that's what we need to have.
Right.
Ah, we have Sarah.
Welcome,
Um,
Sarah.
Sorry
and there's
about that. I'm back.
There's two periods. You really wanted to terminate that sentence. Okay. So we could just kind of go back to what we really want to talk about rather than editing, as long as we got Sarah.
Sorry.
No worries. We were doing this because you weren't here.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I'll stop sharing and we'll come back to this later.
Thank you, Tom.
So Sarah,
Yes.
we we have we have questions and comments about the middle housing stuff.
Great.
And
Okay. I'm
we-
ready.
We remain perplexed a bit, and
Okay.
I think Lynn was putting it really clearly, if you don't mind, Lynn, about the 1, 2, and 3 things that we want to get clarification
Yes.
about, because at this point we're thinking we need our own consultant.
So I wrote these down before the meeting just so I could be concise and articulate, which
Okay.
2 o'clock is not my prime concise and articulate period. That's more like 6 a.m. So,
Okay.
so
I'm
I
with
wrote
you
it
on that.
down. But Sarah, so very briefly, and I will let others amplify and correct here. When you sent us the document with the 4 PDFs,
Yes.
that my initial reaction, several of our initial reactions was, okay, so these are the documents following the process that began with us generating a draft,
Mhm.
taking it to the CAC who voted on it.
Yep.
Then it went to LCDC and
It's not yet.
it's
That
not
is
gone
my
to
next step.
Did it go to DLCD?
That is my next step.
Okay, so
I've been waiting to send them off before your comments. I wanted you guys to see them one more time before I did, but what you have is the final product that the consultant and I put together based on committee and community feedback that we are confident that DLCD will sign off for being compliant with the middle code requirements.
Okay. So what we were concerned about and questioning, so that's a helpful correction to my notes. So let me make a note here. What I was concerned about, the first document I opened, let me give a concrete example, was the example where it talked about all the things that could be built on an R1 lot. And it was a list of, on a standard residential lot. And it was a long list of things, including, what are they called? Quadplexes.
Yes.
And I looked at it and I thought, okay, so I'm a little confused here because I think when we submitted our document to the CAC in Neskowin, we were really thinking that we could limit what could go on an R1 lot to have the right kind of middle housing for Neskowin. So if you could build a quadplex on an R1 lot in Neskowin, whether it's east or west of the highway, just out of the chute, it seemed like we did a lot of work to get very specific about what that had to look at, but it didn't apply to the whole list of opportunities for building there. So maybe if you could talk through to us, maybe I pose this as a question. Either we need to go through those 4 documents and make sure that the CAC understands what they voted for, because I would guess, not that I'm saying they didn't understand it, but it was much more meaty than what we gave them in their vote. My my copies did not show all of that content going to CAC. So that's a procedural question. The more kind of on the ground question I have is, we want to be really clear with the people of Nesco which of this work is our recommendation and which of this work is just the county and the state saying this is the way it has to be.
Okay.
And part of my concern there is we have been working without professional planning staff. We don't have anyone with a planning degree. I don't think Guy's degree is in planning. And it's great to serve on a planning commission, don't get me wrong, but we need to be able to truthfully say to people in Nesco, here is what can happen on these properties. And that brings me to my second point. That map that you gave us, the preliminary draft, we're going to need to get the additional mapping elements on that map in order to have an informed conversation with people this summer. And that was a concern as well, because until people see where the middle housing goes vis-a-vis R1, R2, excuse me, RR, R1, and R3, and vis-a-vis sewer and water capacity and CC&Rs, we're going to be having a conversation not grounded in the facts, which is what people are going to want. So I just want to put that on the table. And I don't know what H&B is, which is...
That's the highest and best use. That's that tax challenge we had for properties that are in a farm or forest tax deferral.
Got it. Thank
Yep.
you. Okay.
So maybe what would be helpful is if I walk you through the documents, and you're going to see a common theme, and then the meat of the work that we have done is in section 5.120.
Okay.
Right. So that's where, I mean, when you look at the Nesco and zoning districts themselves, really the changes are adding those middle housing code options as uses permitted outright. There were no other changes made.
So I think it would be, Ran, is that, because I think that is what, and I know that's going to take time, but I think the most helpful thing would be for us to go through those documents and have on the record the interface between that and what we took to the CAC.
Yeah. Can I ask, Sarah, did you get the copy of the PDF where I had made comments? I think I meant to send it to you. I don't know if I did or not.
Tom, when did you send it?
Would have been a couple of days ago. So, because there were parts of it that I thought did not reflect what our requests were. Okay, I've got the document.
I do not have it. And I would say that again, because unfortunately, the community meeting happened before I was able to get you guys these documents for review, right? So backtracking, I had to go back and work with the consultant, knowing what the community desires were. And this was something, I don't remember who I talked to, but there's some mays and shalls where the community wanted shall, but I had to put may. Right. So the product is our efforts to get as close to those community desires as possible while also meeting those state code requirements. And there may still be some other things that'll change once DLCD reviews it, and whatever they tell me I have to change, I have to change. I'm not going to have a choice on that.
Right. So again, I think that argues for going through the documents.
Yeah. Because I mean, you guys you haven't seen them yet. So then I can connect the dots and show you where those community choices and things come in, or I've been able to put them in. And then other things where working with the consultant, understanding the community's desires, what I was able to do, and unfortunately, what I was not able to get to the finish line.
And Tom, if you have your documents, maybe bring them up when we're in that section of what we're reviewing.
Right. Well, and Rand, what I would say, if it's okay with the group, because I am getting these documents to DLCD this week.
Oh my,
I've been waiting for this meeting to do that because I have to give them 35 days before I go to hearing. I can make changes here and there, but I got to get that started.
Yep.
And so, Tom, if you don't mind, what I'd like to do is walk through the documents just so everybody on the meeting today hears everything that I say in terms of the documents and their structure. And then we can go through Tom's questions when we're done, because you're going to see a theme really quick. It's not going to take me long, but I think we should walk through them and then go back to Tom's questions per section.
okay.
Okay, because I want to make sure we can stay focused and I don't miss sharing any important details with you guys. All right, okay, so let's start, and I'm going to walk you through by starting with the RR zone. Okay, so let's start with the property zoning that has the biggest lot sizes and walk through. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a share screen. Okay, can everybody see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically this is what your zoning district for the NESCO and rural residential zone already looks like. The changes made to uses permitted outright are highlighted in yellow. So nothing else has changed if it's not highlighted.
But yes.
Okay, so those changes, so what I did was I added accessory dwelling unit. It's already been adopted, right? And that section 5.110 already exists. So I added it as B. That was more of a housekeeping issue. C is the duplex. D is the triplex. And then we have the quadplex, townhouses, and cottage clusters. So in the work that we've done, what we know is that we have to allow all those middle housing types as an outright permitted use in this zone. Now, what's important is the reference to section 5.120 for triplex and above, because that's where I have put all the standards and development requirements for those uses. Because what I didn't want to do is have each zoning district for NESCO be 20 pages long.
Right.
And it's the same thing. Those standards, the lot sizes and stuff are different per zone, but the development standards themselves are the same. So it just made sense to put them in all in a document so that each of the zoning districts, instead of being 20 pages, would reference a special section where they are all contained.
And Sarah, can you refresh my memory? When we met at the art gallery, is this the version that we looked at?
It is. It is. All of
Okay.
these are the ones you guys looked at. I've put draft back on them because I'm altering them now.
Right.
Right. But yes, all those stacks of all those zoning districts I brought to you were these.
Okay. And
Yes.
so when people see these this summer,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll use a version that is yellow highlighted so they can see it.
Yep.
I think our subcommittee needs to be prepared for for the reaction to this, right?
Okay.
So keep going. I don't want to interrupt the flow.
So, and Lynn, I would say I appreciate that, but as this project transitions back to me,
yes.
I would like to be there to help because I appreciate what you guys are trying to do. But I think it's really important as this work, because your point, I am your planner.
Yes.
I am your planner to make sure that I am helping and supporting to deliver those messages and to be there to hear the reactions.
Right. Okay, let's keep going.
So what we know is, again, with the middle housing, we have to allow all these middle housing types as uses permitted outright. And so that's where I put them.
I have a question.
Yep.
On C,
Mm-hmm.
It's the only one of those that doesn't reflect back to the section 5.110. Is it
Yes.
not? Like
It
a
does
mul-
not, because remember, we have to treat a duplex and a single family as the same.
And so these development criteria are different than if you would build a single family or a duplex.
So a single family and a duplex are now looked at exactly the same. So whatever standards apply to single family apply to a duplex.
And then these are additional criteria if it's a triplex or bigger.
You got it. That's
Got it.
exactly right, Lori. Good job. Okay. So, and then I didn't touch anything else because as we've talked about extensively, I can't monkey with the other uses that have already been adopted as being allowed in these zones. Right?
Right.
So everything else is staying the same.
And Sarah, I think one of the critical points this summer, for example, will be for people to see that mobile and manufactured homes are already allowed.
Yeah. And in fact, I mean, technically for housekeeping, I could have taken that whole thing out and struck it because the building codes division does not differentiate, like you can't, just like middle housing years ago, you can't discriminate between those, like, that's a strong word, but between those housing types. Manufactured home, we permit just like a single family dwelling that's stick built.
Right. I think it's really critical to leave it in though, because again, people just aren't going to be current on these provisions.
Right, which was why, especially at the art gallery, wanting to prepare, wanting people to see.
Yes.
Most people don't realize all the uses that are permitted outright and conditionally in these residential zones.
Yes. And I think to a certain extent, if we can use some of these attachments in the public notice of the summer meetings, it will be critical. And particularly those summer meetings go to the zip code of the county. That's a full community distribution, or to the 700 emails that we have at the CAC.
It'll be I think it'll be the email distribution.
Okay, so Ran and Nancy, we need to kind of factor that into our plans because that's the distribution we'll need to do.
Yeah, no,
Even if we're just directing people back to the website, we're going to need to say, this is coming and
Read
we're
it.
going to send you some stuff, but it's also incumbent on you to go onto the website and look at it.
Yeah.
Right. And I will, so based on our changes, because we are not further restricting existing property development rights, I do not have to do a Measure 56 notice for Nescoin. But what I will do is make sure the Nescoin CAC has notice of the hearings to share with membership. And then we'll want to make sure we have this community meeting before those hearings start. And I am tentatively scheduling Nescoin. Nescoin will probably be July. It'll be the 4th Thursday in July.
So let me just look at this here. The 4th Thursday in July is the 24th.
Yep. So that'll be the Planning Commission hearing date. And then the Planning Commission moves it to the Board of Commissioners.
So is it just one day unless it gets prioritized for another hearing? It's just hearings on one day, that'll be it.
I have 6 different Planning Commission hearings scheduled, and I will
Okay.
have 6 different Board of County Commissioner, Randall, because I'm doing 8 different communities. And
Okay,
I'm not piling them all together. I'm separating them out.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
And what time of day is that meeting as a rule, Sarah?
7 p.m.
7 p.m.?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And they are virtual, like I do a hybrid. It's a Planning Commission hearing, so they're hybrid.
Okay.
Okay. So uses permitted conditionally. Everything as it has been written and adopted remains the same, except for the only thing I did was I moved a 2-family dwelling, which is a duplex, out of uses permitted conditionally, because now it has to be an outright permitted use per our middle housing code updates. Other than that, everything that's in here has always been in here.
Much
That
to Mr. Doc Sievert's chagrin.
Right. Correct. But again, This scope of work does not include removing any of these other uses. All right, okay,
I had no comments on the RR. So-
okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and just walk us through this just a little more, Tom. Thank you. Okay, so you have your uses outright, and then what matters are the zone themselves development standards. So Lori, as you astutely pointed out, these apply to everything. And then those criteria, those standards that are in 512 are those that also then apply in addition to triplexes, fourplexes, etc. So as we have discussed, we are not changing the minimum lot size requirement. So for a triplex, fourplex, cottage cluster, and a 4-unit townhome, the minimum lot size remains 20,000 square feet for those uses. So if someone wants to do a duplex or a single family and their lot isn't 20,000 square feet, that's fine because those two are still allowed. But for a triplex or greater, the first qualifier is your property big enough? And we have kept that qualifier at 20,000 square feet, which is why you don't see any work there. Okay. Again, basically B, all of that stuff exists. It just acknowledges if your lot is less than 20,000 square feet, you can build on it. And in this case, what we know is it's a single family or a duplex. All right, so I had to add D because for a townhome development, if you recall, those are the child lots that are part of the parent lot. So the parent lot is 20,000 square feet as required above, but then all those child lots still have to have a minimum size. And so what we've said is 1,500 square feet, but the average is 5,000 square feet because if a townhome unit is 4 units and you have a 20,000 square foot minimum lot size requirement, you divide 4 into 20,000, you get 5,000. There's your math. Okay. The rest of this is the same. I'm not touching your driveway standards. So we're going to leave all that the same. There are some nuances to that for triplexes, fourplexes, and townhomes in section 5.120. But again, at the end of the day, that's all staying the way it is.
Okay.
Right, does that make sense? And then what we talked about was reducing the minimum street side yard setback to 10 feet. So that's reflected here. And then the lot coverage applies to everything still, except for townhomes. Because you can't meet the width maximum lot coverage if it's wall to wall of the unit. You've got 100% width, but we can still apply the 70% depth.
So Sarah, I do think that the way this is formatted here, obviously it's very helpful having you talk us through it, but the way it's formatted with the yellow and the blue and the side comments is actually really helpful for everyone to see.
I can keep it this way too. Yeah.
I think it's really important because again, we're assuming a level of exposure to this that is now kind of dated. That meeting at Hawk Creek was quite some time ago. But also because a lot of people are just going to zoom in immediately on the property they own, which of course we understand. So the clarifying points are quite helpful.
Yeah, great. Okay. Yes, which is why, yeah, I would love to be a part of that presentation is because I think.
We need you there, believe me.
Okay, yeah, because
I still have a question about townhomes.
yes, Lori.
I have not been able to get it into my head that the townhomes can go all the way to the property lines on either side if they have a setback at the front and the back. I think that would be a really horrible surprise and an unwanted neighbor for someone who has an existing house in Esquin and had a little house next to them torn down and 4 townhomes built, the tower above the existing house is left and this goes all the way to the property line.
Okay.
And
This is where I really wish I could share one of my terrible drawings with you, Lori, because I'm doing a terrible job of verbalizing it. But can you hold that, please? And I'm gonna show you a nice diagram and walk you through what you're talking about, because what you're concerned about will not be able to happen because setbacks on those exterior sides that are not Commonwealth still also apply. So I'll get you a visual in a minute.
okay, so if we're taking this to the public that hasn't sat through as many meetings as I have and read the document as many times as I have, to see that blue comment that says allowed up to 100% of the lot width, no matter what the picture says, if they can go to those words and say it says 100% of the lot width, then someone like me saying, oh, no, Sarah says, look at the picture.
Right.
You
So I-
need a term for a sublot. Or if you called it the child lot, then that would be a whole lot clearer.
What I can say here, hang on just a sec, let me go to my Word version of that. What I can say there is the interior lots are not subject to the 70%
Yes,
lot
that
width.
would work.
Okay.
That would work.
Okay, hang on. Let me open up this other document. I don't know if you guys can see my messy file organization here. Okay, let me add that here. And then what I'll do is I'll carry that over in the others as well. So then that way it's consistent. Okay, let's see. Let me go here. Let me find that real quick. Okay, let me delete that and let me do that interior townhouse units. Okay, so I'm going to say the building width at all points shall not exceed 70% of the distance between opposite side lot lines, except that interior townhouse units shall not be subject to the standard. Does that
Yes,
work
that
for
works.
everybody? All
Works
right.
for me.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Lori, thank you for that. Anything else on the RR? And Tom, you didn't have anything on the RR.
That is correct.
Okay, all right, let's keep rolling. Let's go to the R1. Okay, and Ted, I am so happy you are here today. You're gonna see that, as you have probably already, that 100-foot setback is still there, but that is something that we will bring up independently, I'm sure, in the hearing proceedings. So I haven't touched it, but just want to honor our conversation the other day about that as well and let you know that that is on my radar too.
Yeah.
I don't know what the planning commission's going to do or if they will make a recommendation, but I want you to know that we have not forgotten about that. Okay, so the R1 zone, same thing, same theme as in the RR. So uses permitted outright, added the things I needed to add. And it looks exactly the same as the RR zone. Now, there are
Oh.
other uses in the R1 zone, huh?
So, I was just thinking in terms of presenting this to people, the sequence, which ones to start with, because are most of the available lots in R1 or RR?
I think based on size and the size qualifiers, because we've retained the minimum lot size, right? So my guess is, and this is a total guess, is that most people are not going to be worried about single family or duplex. They're going to jump to triplexes and larger, and they're going to want to know where are they going.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So in that case, that's where that minimum lot size requirement becomes more significant. And Lynn, it's probably honestly a toss up between the two.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So
Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay.
I do have a couple of comments on that section if you if we can do that now.
Sure.
Since duplexes were conditional before, can we specify that they look more like the triplex and quadplex design elements rather than the single family? In other words, we have some,
No, we would have to apply them to single family as well then. So we would have to go
Why?
back to the community and vote to apply all of those standards to all housing types, including single family dwelling. The state code requires us, if we go beyond those minimum code requirements for the design standards in 5120. If we go beyond that, or if we want those to apply to single family and duplex, I have to do a Measure 56 notice. The other thing I will tell you based on my meeting in Oceanside yesterday is that it could render properties in Nescoin non-conforming who have already built and do not meet those design standards. And that is a whole other property rights takings issue.
Yep.
so the fact that you've moved from one category of allowed with conditionally allowed and moved it to unconditionally allowed doesn't allow you to change anything in that process.
That is correct.
That's weird.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it has to be, we're treating them exactly
I
like single
I accept
family.
it. I
Yeah,
accept it.
sorry.
It's
Okay.
weird. That's it.
But good question. Right, so,
Okay,
okay,
I have more.
okay,
Section 5.110 does not require the triplexes be attached. We specifically ask for that.
okay. So,
Did that get answered?
so everything is attached except for a duplex can be attached or detached.
Where does it say that? I didn't see it anywhere.
It's in 5120.
Okay,
So,
I'll look again.
and it's going to be in the definitions as well. So an accessory dwelling unit is in 5.110, Tom, and then the triplex, fourplex, et cetera, is in 5.120. Those are two separate sections.
Okay,
Okay. No, that's why in all of these zoning districts, a duplex is specifically called out to be attached or detached. But then triplexes, quadplexes are also required to be attached.
okay, I missed that.
Okay, yeah, and that is everywhere. I have NETARTs and Pacific City who say they can be attached or detached, or maybe it's just NETARTs for a triplex and a quadplex. So in their language right here, this language is also in there to specify, because that is the only community that any plex can be attached or detached.
Okay, what's confusing is in 5.120, it shows diagrams with them being detached. And that's a bit confusing to me.
Okay, so some of those are townhomes, Tom, because a townhome is up to 4 units. So it's in different spaces. So I'm going to walk you through that document here in just a bit.
Okay.
Okay, so hang on to those questions though, because I want to make sure they're answered when we get to that point. Anything else about just uses permitted outright? Okay.
So Sarah, in the conversations of this initiative across Tillamook County, has there been any discussion of kind of prompting a development surge based on the ability to take high valued land and get much higher density? I mean,
so the next piece of the Senate Bill 406 process are the housing production strategies.
right, okay. I just meant in the conversations, is the county thinking, whoa, we're gonna have a land rush here by recreational and tourist developers?
No, we're not. And
Okay.
no, and here's what I would say too, is that, our work you know, we're not all going to wake up tomorrow and the quadplex fairy was here. Our goal with this work is to create a path for additional options. There's all kinds of things that go with this, including housing production strategies. You've got SDCs, you know, there's all kinds of other elements that go into development. And some of them we can work on through the county, and bless you, and some of them we can't. But our exercise, our purpose is to create that path. Okay. Good question, though. All right. And I will say, because I know this keeps coming up, that's why in the short-term rental ordinance, which is not land use, but it does limit for multifamily structures, you cannot license all of them. Right? There's those other pieces built in there. That was intentional because I think to what you're kind of alluding to, Lynn, about, you know, are these all, you know, are these properties going to be bought up and then all of a sudden we have a bunch of more boutique hotels everywhere? We have
Right.
caps, we have ownership limitations, and we have specific provisions that do not allow for all units in multifamily to be eligible for STR licenses. That would just, I think, in my opinion, just completely undermine our work.
Okay.
Okay. So 2-family dwelling, we've bumped that up with its appropriate designation as a duplex to uses permitted outright. And then nothing else here has changed. It was the only change in uses permitted conditionally. Okay. So in standards, we are retaining the 7,500 square feet minimum lot size requirement. Where that becomes relevant is, again, triplex, fourplex, townhome, cottage cluster. The state has required we remove that additional land area requirement, which is why it's crossed out. I can't do it anymore.
So, okay, so let me see. The minimum lot size should be, except that the minimum lot size for a 2-family dwelling should be 10,000. Okay.
Right.
And the reason they took that out is why?
It's a barrier. It's the same lots, right? Like, so it's, we have to apply the same lot size or follow the model code. And the model code for a triplex and a quadplex and a cottage cluster is actually less than 7,500 square feet. But because Nescoin had 7,500 square feet already adopted, we could use that.
Yes. And so what about like septic tank drainage fields and stuff?
So that's where it says the lot may have to be bigger.
Okay.
The county sanitarian may require larger lot sizes.
Okay.
So that
Okay.
acknowledgement is there. Absolutely. Good question.
All right.
Okay. So then now we get back to the math for townhome units. So this is the same thing, but now instead of 20,000 square feet, we're at 7,500. So again, the minimum lot size per townhome unit per child lot is 1,500. But then when you divide 7,500 into up to those 4 units, it's not 5,000 anymore because our lot size is smaller. So that's the math. And then the rest of this remains the same. We've got that reduction for that street side yard. And then I will change this, Lori, again, except that interior townhouse units shall not be subject to that, so that is also clear. Does that make sense to everybody? So what I did in the Nescoin RR zone, I will just rinse and repeat to make sure that that's for that clarification.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So any questions, Tom? Any more comments you had about the R1 zone?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Moving right along. Let's go ahead and go to the R3 zone. All right. Let me go ahead and blow this up. Okay. Okay. So in the R3 zone, a 1, 2, 3, or 4 family dwelling was already allowed. So this exercise was not shifting uses, it was a terminology exercise. Right, because see, we've done a strike through because we are now calling them out in their appropriately defined names. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Yes,
Okay, so
except it
it's
should be
this,
simplex if you're going to have one, just to keep it consistent.
Ah,
I love working with you, Tom.
ah.
Okay, so then here's where it gets dicey. We touched on this a little bit last week. What I am waiting for DLCD to say, because see where it says multifamily dwellings, including apartments and condominiums, as a use permitted conditionally, we had to remove townhouses because we've bumped up to 4 units to uses permitted outright. What the state is moving towards for everyone, is that all residential housing types can only be allowed outright. So when we talk about multifamily dwellings, including apartments and condominiums, in our work, what this is 5 or more units. And what I am hoping will happen in DLCD's review is that they will tell me it is okay for now to leave them as uses permitted conditionally. What is going to happen eventually is going to be one of 2 things. This is my prediction. They're going to make me move that also up to uses permitted outright with clear and objective standards, or we amend the NESCO and R3 zone to where the highest density is middle housing, and I do a Measure 56 notice to remove that use.
As I recall, the definitions, which by the way weren't in that package, multifamily is different. I mean, it has some very different properties than the triplex, quadplex, and all that. Did I remember that correctly?
Yes, you did. So I'm hoping, at least for now, what I'd like to do is finish this process, give us some breathing room. I don't expect DLCD to come knocking on our door for a few years. But I think we will have to decide eventually what to do, and whether it's to, in the R3 zone, to continue to allow opportunities for multifamily apartments and condos, either as uses permitted outright, or I have to go to the commissioners and ask about doing a Measure 56 notice. If you think about our map, we don't have a lot of properties zoned R3 in Nescoen, and basically it's where most of the condos in those more than 4 units are already located. So yeah.
So just so I understand, your recommendation is we leave this as is
Yep,
and we wait for the state to come back and tell us to change it.
that's right.
Yeah.
So if anyone wanted to do in the R3 zone, because this only applies in the R3 zone, if somebody wanted to do 5 or more units as specified here, I would still review it as a conditional use. But if you noticed in the R1 and the RR zone, there is no more density opportunities beyond the middle housing. So at most per property, it's 4 units in a plex or townhome, or 8 cottage clusters. And there will never be more residential development contemplated on those lots. Some of them can be divided, right? But middle housing is as high as the densities we're going. This is the
Right.
only zone that's different.
So a really critical factor in that. So I support your recommendation here, Sarah. I
Thank you.
do think it's really important to note that Nesco is not ever going to have a hospital. It most likely will never sustain a public school. It doesn't have enough land mass or most critically, access to employment to merit kind of more urban levels of density. And so what you would get is if you allow greater density, what you will get is commercial tourist which again, I'm not against tourism, but I think it's really questionable. Given that we're a tsunami zone, should factor in here somewhere, but I think
It will for critical and essential facilities,
yes.
right?
Yes, but I just think pushing beyond the current state without the state itself taking the responsibility for going in that direction, which I would anticipate there would be discussion of, maybe not, but I'm not for prompting a Measure 56 review. I'm not for prompting a higher level of density that increases the prospect of land speculation with no affordable housing resulting. In fact, with
Right.
the reverse occurring.
Yep. No, I can appreciate that. I think one of the reasons why it is important to leave these zoning districts the way they are with other uses is that, let's say one day the community boundary expands and we don't have to go through an incorporation process. It's because we're working on hazard planning and like relocating the community, right, to different areas outside of the tsunami inundation zone. We may want to zone some of those areas R3. Right. And then it becomes a different story. There could be other properties where if someone came to me and wanted to do a zone change, and I can't think of what those are right now, but I mean, that may be viable to put a clinic or something somewhere else later. So I think not touching them is also good in that we don't know what the projected community needs are going to be in 20 years.
Right.
But Lynn, I completely agree with you and I appreciate what you're saying. Okay. So anything else? Okay, so in the standards, okay, so this is the only zone where the existing minimum lot size is less than the state model code allowances. So, and okay, so this gets interesting too. I'm going to go back up here for a minute. These uses up to 4 units have already been allowed in the R3 zone, right? Everybody got that? We're on the same page?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So with those uses already allowed, they've also been allowed on properties with a smaller minimum lot size.
Yes.
Okay, so if I increase the minimum lot size requirement, that may be a property rights issue. If I make it bigger than what it has been, that maybe does that make sense to everybody? Because now we're going in the reverse direction.
Yeah, well, but the R3 are just like on 2 streets in Nesquin Village. Is that kind of true as far as R3?
So it's only, are you asking, Ran, if it's just a couple of lots? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's like two streets in Nesquin already have multiple units on them, and it's a more commercial oriented and higher density. Those things are already indicated in those sections, and I think it's only two blocks or maybe 3.
Yeah, it's not much. What I'm going to try to do is, So for a
Please.
triplex, the model code is you can allow them, or you must allow them at 5,000 square feet unless you already have a pre-existing larger minimum lot size. So I'm going to hang on to the 5,000 square feet and the 6,000 square feet based on slope. For a quadplex or a cottage cluster, what we are actually proposing is 7,000 square feet, which is more than what is up here. Now, what I'm hoping I can argue in this case is that yes, but if we added the additional land area per unit, as was required before, what we're proposing now is actually less and provides greater flexibility.
So Sarah, on those things where two things can be true at once. So one of the things, the net effect of all of these is to expand development capacity in Nescoin beyond where it has been in my lifetime. And I don't want that to be lost here. This is more development opportunity than any of us have seen in Nescoin for 20 years. That's a safe statement.
Yes. And I would say since it was platted with those smaller lots
Right.
that intended that dense development, and then over time, the natural pattern has been to create bigger lots with bigger homes. And now
Right.
we're starting to kind of go back to that different look, but same density.
But if you increase the square footage here, aren't the ones that are already as they are? You're talking about the ones that are already as they are and they are vacant, then that's where the taking question comes in. Is that correct?
That's right. That's
Right.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
But I'm gonna try to see if DLCD will support this without having to look at this as a takings.
Well, but I also think that's for the committee that we probably should, what is people's take on this? I mean, this is, you know, that it's important to know what you think. And Ted, you're here as well. So if you have thoughts, please speak up.
Lori, honestly, I have a hard time picturing this visually, like what this really means. I know I should be able to like conceptualize that. But looking at those numbers and those words, I would love to have a sketch that says, oh, this is the difference between this and this.
So would the houses or the multi-unit houses that exist on, is it Yam Hill and McMinnville? Those are they're set back off the street. There's 2 or 3 units, or maybe some things have been put together. And so that's a higher density look that exists in these R3 neighborhoods. But they were probably done in a sensitive way not to impose themselves, to kind of fit in, even though they're multi-units.
Yeah.
Leave a lot of open space in front of them.
And they are a third to a half of an acre or more.
Well, those are bigger lots. They're like double.
Yeah. So, right. So whether we follow the model code at 7,000 or retain the existing language, it's not going to generate a non-conforming issue for those properties. We're safe there.
So, and theoretically, you're going to show us some examples of some of these things that were difficult for us to understand. You said we're going to get to some diagrams or models or something. Is that going to help with this one?
No, it will not. No, it's in 5120, but we can have the conversation for sure. And I think it's an important one to have with the community.
You know, this is one of those areas where it really requires hearing, I guess what I'm going to suggest is if we increase, what the question I'm going to pose is it better to, in this draft, thank you for making it so clearly a draft, to say we're increasing it to 7,000 to see how people respond, or is it better to leave it as is and say, this could be raised, but we've chosen not to raise it? I mean, part of what we're trying to do is to get people to respond who have concerns, because to Lori's point, we've looked at this from every angle. And it's the on the ground stuff that always makes someone raise their hand and say, wait, that's a problem that I've been planning on doing X for years and now I can't. So to me, I don't know how the subcommittee wants to phrase this for the public meetings, but my guess is either way, whether we say keep the existing standard or go to a bigger square footage, we will get comments from people who are affected or have an opinion. Even if they're not affected, they may have an opinion. I just can't foresee that. And I'm very reluctant to change things unless there's a substantive reason for doing it.
Right. Well, and I would say that just going back, taking a step back to what we have initially talked about, which is the minimum 7,000 square foot lot size requirement for quadplexes, townhomes, and cottage clusters. That is what this reflects.
So I guess when you started, my understanding when you started explaining what was in yellow here was that this was what the consultants told us we needed to have to make it go through the.
That is correct.
So
Yes.
do we have a choice here?
In this case, your choice is to keep it at 5,000 or 6,000. So what I have done the whole time is recommended what is the most we can do.
The most
What is the
restrictive we
most?
can do?
Yes.
So if you were to go with that concept, you would delete the yellow on B, or we would just get rid of B.
No, B is the most restrictive.
B is the most restrictive. Okay,
Right.
so if we were to go with your concept, then we get rid of what's crossed out on A.
That's right.
Okay.
And because we would have to follow the 5,000 and 6,000 square feet.
Okay. So when we present this to the community, I wonder if there should be another little blue comment that tells how we got to what's in A and B, like B is required and A further restricts what B can do or something like that.
So typically so the way, just to keep it simple so people's brains aren't totally and completely fried and numb when they leave, is just to say, in this instance, in this R3 zone, because the minimum lot size requirement is actually lower than what the state would allow for a quadplex or a townhome or a cottage cluster, we have gone to the state model code, which requires a larger land area requirement, and are recommending that requirement of 7,000 square feet.
Would it be the same to say 4A further restricts what is allowed in 4B? Is that true?
I would say 4A would actually continue to lower, 4A would increase more opportunities for quadplexes, townhomes, and cottage clusters because the minimum lot size requirement is less. Okay. It's actually going to create a larger incentive for quadplexes, townhomes and cottage clusters
For B,
is what the state will allow us to
Got it,
adopt
okay.
for a minimum lot size that is larger than what we have.
But
So without a map showing the application of the verbiage, I mean, you know, first of all, always when we meet with people this summer, we're going to say, if you have a question about your specific property, you're going to talk to our planner, who is Sarah Absher. We're not going to put ourselves in that chair because we don't have the authority to do that, nor should we. But the other question is, when we look at that map,
Mhm.
I'm less concerned. I mean, I'm individual property owners obviously will have individual views. It's hard to see how these line up in the abstract. So how many of the what no one wants to do is make Nescoin an urban area, right? In look, feel, and alignment of properties. And so these conversations are kind of in the abstract right now because we're not looking at it on the ground. We're not looking at specific properties and their alignment.
Right.
So
So-
I'm just,
Yeah, so
That's-
Lynn, I agree with you. I would say that Nescoin is urban, especially the village. If you look at the number of units per acre, that it exceeds the definition of urban. But I know
It
it doesn't
does?
feel that way. Yes, it does.
because
But
so
here's-
that's like a threshold of 200 people.
It's so many dwelling units per, oh shoot. Hang on just a sec, you guys. I can stay on this meeting. I just have to let Mark know I can't do a CAC chair meeting right now. It's the number of units per acre.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, okay. But here's, let me tell Mark. But here's what I would, here's what I would offer. So I have had so typically when I've been ready to bring the drafts forward, I've actually put together a presentation for communities and done the presentation to walk them through the drafts with the map. And what I do is a fear, fact, and feasibility exercise
Yep.
with the community at the end. And
Yep.
unfortunately, I've not had an opportunity to do that with Nescoin. So when we talk about a presentation, I would love to do what I've done in other CACs
Right.
because it addresses everything that you're talking about.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And Sarah, that's a reminder to us as well with your busy schedule this summer and the fact that it is summer. We need to identify those dates quickly.
Yeah, I would love to be a part of that conversation of scheduling of when the next presentation is going to happen.
Yep.
And have a chance to maybe be more engaged and interactive in putting that together.
Yep.
I think
Okay.
it will be based on your schedule.
Thank you. Yeah, because I actually jumped on to, I left a meeting when you guys did the presentation to the community. I left a meeting to jump on to come to that one, which was also why I was late. So yes. Hang on just a sec. I need to let Mark know I'm going to stay on this meeting with you guys. We have a chair meeting.
Okay, so that's helpful.
Okay, yeah, because I have this whole thing that I've put together. I actually have the data of like breaking it down to the number of parcels. And then we talk about topography, we talk about roads, like the whole thing to where it leaves people. My goal is always to leave people knowing we're creating the path. But again, we're not going to wake up tomorrow and our community is going to look completely different.
So again, I think we've, unless someone wants to propose deletion or changes here, I think in the current form where it shows what's being deleted and what the breakdowns are for the square footage, I think putting it out there like this is what we want to have the conversation around.
Yeah, it helps people understand there are a couple of choices
Yes.
and they can participate in making that choice.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes. Okay. So then with townhomes, again, we've done the math based on the 7,000 square feet, it's a little less than the R1 zone because the R1 zone was at 7,500, which we could keep because it was the existing minimum lot size. Right, so R1 is 7,500, R3 is 5,000. For townhomes, in the R1 zone, we kept the 7,500 because it was bigger. In the R3, we're using the state model code for 7,000 square feet because it's bigger. But you are correct, one of the community choices could be, do you want to incentivize this type of development by reducing the minimum lot size requirement to the 5,000? That's the
Yep.
question.
Yep.
And what I have heard from the committee is no. And so that is why I have put this in here the way I have.
The
But I
committee-
think getting it out there is important.
Yes. Okay. So, and then, let's see. D relates to 5 or more units, which I have to keep in because I'm not touching that use permitted conditionally that we just talked about, apartments, condos, and more than five or more units. So I got to keep D in if I keep that in as uses permitted conditionally. Does that make sense to everybody? That's why it says just applied to 5 or more unit projects.
Yep, it
Okay,
does make sense.
okay. And then all this is there. We've reduced the street side yard setback to 10 feet. And then I will change this to talk about interior townhome units. Because this is where Lori, we talked about with the 70% lot width. Okay. Any questions about the R3? No? Okay. All right, so now we can go to 5.120.
One thing which is not in 5.120 are the definitions.
They will be in Article 11 with all the definitions that apply to all of the ordinance provisions.
As I recall, the previous definitions we saw, we did not agree with.
They will be whatever the state tells me they have to be.
Well,
Sorry.
Talking about attached or detached, that's not an option? Because they allow detached triplexes,
Right.
and that's not an option? Well, it would have been nice to know that.
So when we first talked, what we talked about was allowing a duplex to be attached or detached,
Yeah,
but that 3 and 4 units would be attached because we didn't want to confuse them with the cottage clusters.
yes, that was my understanding of our agreement. But
Yes.
what I thought I just heard you say was that the definitions as they were said attached or detached, and that's not the same.
Right, because like I said, Neat Hearts wants more flexibility, so they actually want to allow them to be attached or detached.
Okay. So I'm still confused. Sorry.
That's okay.
Is the definition attached or detached? Is that the definition?
The definition is attached, but in Neat Hearts, because that use allows them to be detached, their zoning districts actually say attached or detached.
Okay, I'm not quite sure why that applies to what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
I don't know either.
But
Let
So
me see the
in
definitions.
Nescoin, the way the language will read is that 3 and 4 units have to be attached and a duplex can be attached or detached.
Okay,
And that was what I thought we talked about.
yes, that is.
Okay,
And just, I didn't see that anywhere in the documentation, and the absence of something means it isn't there.
okay.
so do we need to go?
I will make a note of that and I will work on that.
Okay,
Okay,
Thanks, Tom. That's an important
Good catch.
catch.
Okay. All right. So middle housing standards. Oh, let me share my screen. Share. Okay. All right. So walking through this document, the very first piece of it that starts talking about regulations and standards is the sufficient infrastructure. And this is where those water, sewer, fire, and road approach letters are required. Does that make sense to everybody? That's right there on the top, because what that means is this repeats, I cannot take in a zoning and building permit without verification. The applicant must demonstrate sufficient infrastructure, and that's through those availability letters.
So Sarah,
Yep.
on the list of things where it talks about access via public or private streets meeting adopted emergency vehicle access standards,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't address if there aren't any streets there. So how does that come into play here?
So tell me more about that, that the street has not been improved or the street has not been platted?
Both. It seems to me both could occur. Now that I don't have the map in front of me, but often in undeveloped land, you have utilities, and you have roads that are not yet built. And particularly when you're trying to increase density, the two things that pop out here for me are, number one, who says there's enough electricity? And just because that's what I used to do. And,
Yep.
and who says there's a road there that is going to carry the capacity that's anticipated? So if it's a gravel road, and depending on the slope, and you're putting a 5+ unit up there,
Mm-hmm.
in Oregon, that's often a challenge. And I don't know that the county's planning on who builds new roads when I assume that's the developer.
That is correct.
And those become private roads?
No.
So does the county have a voice saying, hold on here, ODOT isn't giving us enough money for this many new roads, let alone the maintenance of this many? How does that come into play?
So when someone has a vacant lot that is accessed by a road right-of-way that is not yet improved, it is the developer's responsibility, even for a single family dwelling today, to make those road improvements to serve their property.
And once they've done that,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly for a multifamily place, does the county maintain that road then? They take ownership of it?
So it's already a public street. The question is it a county maintained road or a local access road?
Right.
So that's where that comes back into play.
Okay.
So it depends.
Okay.
But to serve the development, it is the developer's responsibility, just like it's the developer's responsibility to upgrade or install water and sewer infrastructure or power. That same thing applies to the roads.
And we don't have any power issues in Tillamook County?
In terms of
Supply.
infrastructure or supply?
Supply.
There was a presentation. I'm actually sitting, helping Representative Gamba and several others that are working on that energy issue statewide to start upgrading legislation for upgrading of utilities. I would say I don't think we're as bad as other areas across the state,
Right.
but as you know, there's legislation going in to streamline permitting processes to make it easier.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
The
Right.
roads, I don't have the map in front of me, so are the lots that may potentially be developed on the east side of the highway, would they need to pay for improved access to the 101 based upon increased traffic? Or would they just be improving their road that they were using?
So Lori, that's a good question. It depends. So that's where I'm gonna look to Public Works and the fire department. And that's where those letters are gonna tell me what improvements need to be done. Because the slope of the road gradient also applies. There may have to be turnouts or pullouts for fire trucks. They may have to actually plat a road and name it if it's an unnamed easement right now as part of that as well, because there's also a 911 and an addressing element to that, to where you can only have so many addresses off of an easement. Like, you know, where you see those little green markers and there's a bunch of them clustered together off of a gravel road on Highway 101.
Mhm.
You can only do that for so long before you are required to create a road. So it depends, but that's where I'm relying on those experts that have to give me those letters to tell me what they have to do.
Right.
So
Because
this is probably more than we can go into on this discussion, but it kind of goes back to what Ted was talking about with his 4 lots. If somebody's going to, I'm guessing for them, the Public Works to tell you what kind of road you need, you're gonna have to have what you need, what you want to apply for a permit, so that they can tell you what the road's gonna cost. And so if the lot is for sale, somebody's going to have to buy it, trusting that when they spend the money on these permits, that the road that they're gonna be required to do is not gonna cost more than the development is worth. Which if it is intersecting with 101, I would imagine is a pretty big number.
It depends. And they're not going to tell the developer what the road costs.
Right,
What they're going to
right.
do is tell them what improvements need to be done.
yeah,
And then there's bonding, there's all kinds of things that can go with that, which is why like that starts getting outside of the land use realm for purposes of our work. And that's why those sufficient infrastructure letters are so important, because on the back end of that, even, you know, whatever it is, I will not issue a certificate of occupancy for that 4-plex, triplex, single family dwelling. Even today with a single family dwelling, will not issue a certificate of occupancy until I know that that work has been satisfactorily installed.
Go back to your presentation when you were talking about the fear and the feasibility.
Mhm.
I mean, honestly, the feasibility is greatly reduced by that.
It is. We know that.
Concept.
Yeah. But again, that goes back to what is the purpose of our work? It's not to figure everything out.
right.
It's taking that first step of updating our zoning districts to even make it a possibility with clear and objective standards. We can't control interest rates. We can't control asphalt costs, right? All that stuff is beyond what we do. And you're right, Lori, from that standpoint, it does start really like properties, you know, then you add wetlands and steep slopes, you know, and all of a sudden, you know, a 2-acre property, you're now looking at a 4-plex because that's the spot they can do it. Right, with access and all these things. So yeah, it all factors in, but it's the path. We're working on the path.
Okay, let's keep going.
Okay. All right, so triplex and quadplex standards. So the framework of this document is now we start drilling down into those specific things and those standards, those requirements for different types of units that we've been talking about. So it's divided into a few sections, triplexes and quadplexes. It's not going to talk about duplexes because we treat them like single family dwellings. So all that's in your underlying zoning document with all those other setback and height standards. But for everything else, in addition to those standards in the zone, these things also apply. So there's a section for triplexes and quadplexes. there's a section for townhomes, and there's a section for cottage clusters. And so that's how it's broken down, so that depending on what type of development is proposed, once we go through the requirements of the underlying zone, we jump over to this section. Okay. So entry orientation. So what this talks about is that at least one main entrance shall meet the standards below. So not all of them, but one. Does that make sense? And so this is where we start getting into those entry orientation elements that were in the model code. Because our choice is to not have any orientation requirements or to add these. And
And the consultants were fine with these?
they
Okay.
meet model code. And the reason why, especially, remember when we were having the conversations of we don't want to see flat walls. We had a lot of conversations about what buildings could look like if they were facing the street. Because we wanted to make sure they weren't flat and stale. So this is what we can add to address those concerns. And so these are largely, so how this works is that I will look at plans. So a design professional, so someone that's going to design the plans, will have to have this section and to demonstrate on the plans through the design that at least one main entrance meets these standards.
So one of the things that if the developer came in, highly creative proposal, and they wanted an exception to that, obviously they just go through the exception process.
They would have to go through a variance.
A variance, okay. Because the house the multifamily dwelling that they showed on NBC News when the governor was on NBC News, it was interesting to me because I think I know what neighborhood it was in, but I don't know what street it's on. But it was perpendicular to the street, and the entries to the units were sideways, right? They were not fronting the street. They had some windows on the street. But to me, it's kind of like if someone came forward and said, here's a really good way to do this, and it doesn't meet this standard, but it creates a better looking building, et cetera, is a variance like an expensive long-term process, or is it something that if they have a really good plan can be accepted?
Well, I would go back to, it's one main entrance, right? So each unit should have an entrance. Right.
But if each unit has an entrance, does it have to have a whole separate? What you don't want is that hallway thing,
right?
Where you have one entrance to a fourplex that is just the street entrance. I mean, those are really went out of style in like the 80s or 90s. But I just don't want us to be creating that model, because that's a subsidized housing model. It's a cheap construction model.
Totally. So it says the entrance must be, so this is for at least one main entrance, must be within 8 feet of the longest street facing wall of the unit. And the entrance must either face the street, be at an angle of up to 45 degrees from the street, face a common space that is adjacent to the street and is abutted by a dwelling, open onto a porch, and have at least one entrance facing the street or have a roof. And so here is the street. Here's the main entrance. Right. So it's saying at least one of the units, so that, to your point, you don't end up with that tunneled hallway in a cube.
Right. Okay. So it's still an entrance into a unit. It's not just a building entrance.
That's right. It's specific to a unit.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Likewise, here's the example of that up to 45 degrees.
Right.
Now, the implication of this drawing is that those are separate units. And that's where I was coming from.
Right, but they're correct. So in this case, this is perfect because this is our duplex that can be detached. But what you don't see, Tom, is that if it was like 4 units, they might be attached over here, or they could be attached by a common breezeway or something to attach them together.
Okay, I was just suffering from not seeing the updated definitions then.
It's
But
okay.
I was looking for indications that attachment was required, and I wasn't seeing it.
That's all right. I'm gonna work on that for you. But
Okay.
does this make sense? And does everybody feel better about this, knowing you're not gonna see the cube with the tunnel? They can't do a cube with a tunnel into a dark hole and somewhere there's 4 doors or 3 doors in that hole.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. So with that, in addition to the entrance standard, a minimum of 15% of all of the street facing facades must include a window or entrance doors. So that's a minimum. So what that means is whatever part of the structure faces the street, 15% of that has to have that architectural variation. It can be more, that's the minimum. So again, not having that, you have the entry and you have the windows, so you don't have those stale flat walls.
Right.
Right, because that's again, that's we don't want to see that. We're trying to avoid that. And then this is the diagram that shows all of that. And obviously the windows and the doors are more than 15%, but I think this is a good depiction of typically what we would see, just based on construction and design that I see throughout the county. So this is the diagram to help show that.
Yep.
And then garages and off-street parking areas. So garages and off-street parking areas shall not be located between a building and a public street except where they comply. And that is the garage or off-street parking area is separated from the property, is separated from the street property line by a dwelling, or the combined width of all garages and outdoor on-site parking and maneuvering areas does not exceed 50% of the total street frontage. And so what that means is if you're going to, if the parking is in front of the dwelling between the triplex and the street, no more than 50% of that front yard can be parking.
Hmm.
So what that means is that you can't concrete and make the entire front yard a parking lot.
Right. Right.
Which again, we've talked about, right? So this is a very basic formula of you add up all of the driveways, which in your case, they each are 12 feet or 25% of the lot width, unless Public Works decides something else. But you take that form, you take those driveway dimensions and you add them up and you divide them by the length of the lot, and those driveways cannot take up more than 50% of the frontage of the lot.
Okay.
Does that, so if this was 50 feet wide, or let's say this is 100 feet wide, and each driveway is 15 feet wide, let's say for whatever reason, they're all 15 feet wide. So if this is 100, and these are each 15, then that would be 45%. these driveways could each not be 20 feet wide. It would be too big because then they would be 60%. So basically it's actually in line with what Nescowan prefers, which is having more front yard and a manageable driveway width that doesn't take up the whole front yard.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to everybody?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, so then we start talking about driveway approach. So the other thing is that the total width of all driveway approaches, so this is the driveway approach, right? It's that apron where it connects to the road, cannot exceed 32 feet per frontage. Now there's a caveat to that, or if Public Works requires something different, because now we start talking about a transportation safety issue
Right.
and vehicular access.
Okay.
Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so then we got some more diagrams. So this is where if you have 4 units and they all have their driveways on the street, the width, the sum of all the widths in this case could not exceed 32 feet per frontage unless Public Works specified something else. And you
Right.
might see 2 units that actually end up with a shared driveway over here,
Right.
right? So there's some different ways you can see that. So then there's just some more, we just put in a bunch of examples.
You know, it's interesting looking at these again, Sarah, with all this discussion today in my brain. We're going to need to remember to remind people that as charming as they think a deck on the roof might be, that flat roofs don't work well on the coast.
Totally agreed. Oh, I see it all the time. Do you know how many permits we do a year for dry rot that is from a flat roof, and it goes all the way down the walls and
Yep.
it goes inside
Yep.
and it goes everywhere.
Problem.
Yep. And then there's a conversion piece on this because sometimes you might see a bigger home that ends up being converted to a couple of units. And so this is the conversion language for that. So I gotta have something. Okay, so that's duplexes, excuse me. That is triplexes and fourplexes. So then we jump down to the specific townhouse standards. And this is the first one where you see a community choice difference. In visiting with Nescowan Land Use Subcommittee, we've talked about a townhome width of 20 feet. Oceanside and Pacific City Woods want 15 feet. So they want narrower widths for townhomes. And again, that's those interior child unit lots.
So are those is that the official footage for skinny houses? Are those the one room? The whole house has one room all the way back, no halls, just, I mean,
Maybe.
there's
Yeah,
not
it's
a
50, it's
hallway
only
down the
15
middle.
feet wide. Right.
Yeah.
Railroad apartment.
Mm-hmm. But so Oceanside and Pacific City Woods also have lots with a minimum lot size requirement going down to 3,000 square feet and 5,000 square feet. And some of those, they don't mind a narrower width for a townhome because, again, it can incentivize and remove a barrier. So now your lots, that 5 feet, when you look at 4 units, can be a big deal.
Yep.
Okay. So then we get into entry orientation. And so this is where, so one of the things to pay attention to is that where it says at least one or each, right? Because there's some things like where it can say just kind of like shall and may. You may do this, you must do this, you shall do this, or all of them for each unit or at least one for each unit. There's some nuances there in each of these sections.
Right.
Okay, so the entry orientation is very similar to what you saw for the triplex and fourplex.
So are bay windows such a thing that, I mean, aren't they kind of passe?
It depends. We still see them.
They're kind of a design. I mean, they're one of the most dry rot kind of things in
I
the
just
world.
think leak. I just
Yeah.
think leak. Leak is the word that comes to mind when someone says bay window.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you can design them under the eave so they don't even get any direct rainfall. So
That's true.
that's another way to do it.
Okay.
And I would say I have 3, including a window seat and
Ooh,
2 bays,
nice.
and they're all under the eaves.
That's
That
why
makes
I'm in dry
sense.
rot.
Yeah,
So in this one, it says each townhouse must include at least one of the following on at least one street facing facade. So this goes back to the we don't want a flat wall cube, right? So each unit must include at least one feature. So they don't have to include them all. It's at least one. Now, what I envision based on what I've seen built is there's going to be a nice theme of the same things on each unit. So they look architecturally uniform, right? But the idea is, you know, we're giving people options. There's options that they can pick from.
Yeah. I mean, that'll be interesting too.
Right.
I mean, I
And
gotta say, that's a fairly ugly building.
oh
right
my
there.
gosh, this is the most chaotic diagram, right? But what it is supposed to do is line up at least one of those options in each unit
right.
and put them here. It's strictly
It's a
I sh-
demonstration, not
terrible.
Yeah,
a prime example.
Right, right. But I'll tell you what, from a simplistic standpoint, right? Because in addition to working with all of you guys, I'm doing all the new training for my planners.
Ugh,
So this is a great document because it gives
Yep.
them that conceptual, it's simple enough. I think it's chaotic as I'll get out, but, and then you have all the letters that correspond to the option type.
right.
Yep. So each unit must have at least one. Okay, and then reoccurring theme. We have to have
50.
windows in the front,
Right.
and it's a minimum. And then similar to plexes, we've got some driveway requirements. And the reason why this says each townhouse lot has a street frontage of at least 15 feet on a local street is because, Lynn, that gets kind of to some of your points about, well, what kind of a street is it and what is its classification and what is its purpose?
Right.
And so there's a couple of places in here where you're going to see that. And where it also comes up in the expedited land division language in the land division ordinance. Because there's a couple of places where that is. Okay. So,
All right.
right,
Those these are the garage. This is the garage part.
correct. And the garage, and then again, so imagine this being 20 feet, right? Instead of
Right.
15. So, because it's a diagram and it shows that local street. That's right. And then the following standards apply to driveways and parking areas that do not meet the standard above. So if it can't meet I, then there's other standards that can apply without a variance. But again, all of this is subject to review by Public Works, because the other thing is the lot may be big enough for a fourplex or a townhome, 4 units, 4-unit townhome. But again, I have to have that road approach permit from Public Works when they submit their zoning and building permit to verify that, right? That they, I mean, just driveway orientation and design may end up determining the number of units. So Lori, to your point, when we start looking at the feasibility and start peeling away, you know, all of those layers, what does that actually look like based on ground conditions? Okay. And this could be, so I like this diagram because what this diagram reminds me of is when we talk about townhouses, we talk about up to 4 attached units, up to 4. So that means you have to have at least 2 because they have to be attached, and you can have up to 4. So this is a townhome project where it's 2 clusters or 2 projects of 2. The driveway goes in the middle, which maybe topography or something else that would do that. But Lori, to your point, then those setbacks and lot width maximums may not apply. Like this is where when we start looking at those interior units, that language then becomes relevant again, because now you have units that aren't attached because they're in 2 groups of 2.
I thought we were gonna have attached townhouses
There, but it says up to 4, Tom.
up to 4
Up
attached.
to 4 attached. So 2 units
But,
could be
but,
attached.
and 4 units would be attached. That's the language, that's the way I read that language.
Right, it's up to 4 units attached. But you could break them out into 2 groups of 2. You just couldn't have 3 in 1.
But I think
That's
Tom
not
was saying,
obvious.
and I think Tom was saying, and I think what we intended, and we should figure this out, is that if there were townhouses, they all did have to be attached. There could not be 2 and 2.
So for homeowner purposes and individual home ownership, if you have a duplex, that technically could be platted as a 2-unit townhome where each of those units could be sold separately, provided
Yeah,
it meets the other provisions.
Yeah, but that doesn't help the question here. Question here is, to me, 4 units attached means all units are attached to the same unit. There's no language in there say they may be separated. Now, if you had that in there, then that would be permitted. Otherwise, that's prohibited by the way I read that language.
Okay, yeah, I believe because it's up to 4, we have, like this diagram is a diagram that could show when you have 4 units and they're attached. But you've got 2 units and 2 units that are attached. They're not complete. It's not like a row house of complete common wall construction.
The implication by reading that is that it was exactly that.
Okay.
And if that's what needs to be, it's fine, but it needs to be explicit. Drawings do not override text.
You are
Texts
correct.
Text is the law, and drawings are very interesting and may apply.
Yep. You're right. Okay. So let me flesh that out a little better. Okay.
Because I think particularly in Nescoin, the issue would be you're adding cement and minimizing, when you do 2 and 2 like that next to each other with a street down the middle or a shared access driveway, you're eliminating some economies because lining up 4 and having common wall on 3 walls is, or 1, 2, 3, is the cheapest way to go. But the other thing is you're minimizing the ability to make the property look like anything around it, right? I mean,
They have front yards with a window and door configuration and a yard. They've
Mhm.
actually made 1 drive down the middle instead of 4 driveways into the unit.
That's
They
right.
stashed them in the back. So it's kind of a balancing act, it looks like. And then the
And
space around the back.
It gets
what-
you more daylight. That's an important.
It's an open space incentive
Yes,
is what it
yes.
is. So you don't have big building mass. It allows you to cluster the units.
So the theory is then that you drive in the front off the street on the gray thing and you go around back to your garage.
That's
Or
right,
is
'cause
that
then
your
your-
yard?
Your parking is in the back. It could be a garage, or it could just be your driveway. And then this is your yard, and then, right, so your yard is more of your front yard. You still have the backyard and some side yard if you're those exterior units. But the idea is to allow this so you don't see the big building mass. It breaks it
Well,
up.
From a traffic perspective too, it may actually have some advantages because you don't have everyone pulling in and out onto the street.
Right.
Got it. Okay,
Yeah.
now I get it.
You got a place for a basketball hoop back there.
That's, you
Yep.
know what, Randall, that's exactly actually what I thought is I thought if this was a family, that's probably the first thing I do is throw a basketball hoop up there. And tell my neighbors to
Okay.
let me know if they end up with dents in their cars.
Okay,
Okay. So the last section on this then is the cottage clusters, because we've walked through the plexes, we've walked through the townhomes, and now we're at the cottage clusters. So floor area is already defined in Article 11. I will make sure you guys get a final draft of the definitions. That is something, all of the definitions we have to update are just defaulting to those state code definitions.
okay.
We've got, so the maximum building footprint, 900 square feet, and up to 200 square feet for an attached garage or carport can be exempt from the building footprint calculation. So what that means is in addition to the 900 square feet for the cottage cluster, you can have a garage or carport up to 200 square feet, which is basically like, that's going to get you some storage space or one car. And then the height with the single story, we've put at 17 feet. I think 4 that I've yellow highlighted is going to go away. Because everybody's agreed just 3 units per property, and not all properties are an acre.
So if you can do 3 units as a cottage cluster, but we said a triplex had to be 1 building,
Correct.
then aren't we just saying, oh, but you can do a triplex, you just need to call it something different?
Kind of, but a cottage cluster, like a triplex, you could have, you don't have a square footage limitation for living area. You've got a 35-foot height maximum. Right? So for a cottage cluster, I mean, that's where they start getting different. A cottage cluster is a specific type of development that's not detached triplexes, triplex units.
But also the cottage cluster, you eventually, if you feel like it, you can sell each of those separately.
You
Which
can.
once again, doesn't work necessarily for workforce housing because that makes it more valuable if you can actually get your own deed to your own property.
Potentially, you're going to own the cottage, right? You're going to own that child lot. But the other thing I would say is even, you know, for our communities, this is an opportunity to age in place and to buy something smaller to remain in your community. So in that case, the affordability piece of it may not be an issue. It's actually creating housing options that, you know, if you want to get rid of your 3-story house, but not leave Nesco in, and somebody does a cottage cluster, you have an opportunity to stay.
I have to think, really like sleep on this and see if I have an issue about it, but I remember a discussion that said, we're gonna keep triplexes 1 building. And the cottage cluster, what question was one of the questions, like, why wouldn't you just do the cottage cluster instead of the,
Yeah,
so.
right. So what
I'm
you
not
just
sure I
saw
have an
though, we were
opinion.
talking about townhomes. right? So a plex and a townhome are two different things. A townhome is up to 4 units attached. The triplex, they have to be attached. Cottage clusters cannot be attached. And then cottage clusters have the open space and all the other pieces with them that a triplex does not.
I just have this fear that cottage clusters are going to be so darn cool that they are snatched up in 15 minutes.
Maybe unless we get somebody like Proud Ground or somebody here through incentives that
Yeah,
do that. And that's what they do, is to make
Yeah.
sure that doesn't happen.
yeah,
But they can't always move quick.
yeah.
No, we're gonna help them out. And actually, I've had a couple of developers who do workforce housing that have looked at some of those properties east of the highway in Niskowin to really think about those as some workforce cottage clusters. So they're watching. So setback parameter is 10 feet. As we discussed, and a minimum of 3 cottages and a maximum of 8.
Yeah,
And the reason, yep, and the underlying zone pieces here, because in those RR, R1, and R3 zones, that determines the minimum lot size required for that cottage cluster. And as you know, even in Niskowin, depending on the zone, it's different in each zone. It's 20,000 in RR, it's 7,500 in R1, and it's 7,000 in R3. Everybody still with me on that?
yep.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So this is the orientation. And Lori, this is where I really thought about you because we had a lot of conversations about this. The challenge where I'm going to fall short is where I have to say may instead of shall. So this is work I have already done with the consultant. And it says where it must abut the common courtyard or be directly connected to a pedestrian path. And that if 50% of the cottage clusters must be oriented, so not all, but 50% to the courtyard. And then this is what I can't get around, Lori. Cottages within 20 feet of a street property line. I can't say must, I have to say may. So had a lot of conversations with the consulting team about that, because I know that was really important. We had that great conversation that day about connectivity with the greater community.
So what was the rationalization for that?
It can be a barrier, so it provides
How would
flexibility.
possibly be a barrier?
I don't know, Tom.
It
And
can't
this is all-
possibly matter to
I-
somebody building where they put the dang door.
I know.
I think that, so I swear to gosh, Sarah, I did not send that Atlantic Monthly article to all your people in Salem and to DLCD. I'm assuming they found it on their own.
I am sure they found it on their
But it
own.
was a very substantive, thought out analysis of all the things, well-intentioned things people have done that have made it impossible to get housing in the United States today. And I thought, I think I am pleased that people are trying to be sensitive, because the other thing is the developers, if we want workforce housing, they have a very complex financial model they have to stick to. There's only so much they can do before they just can't do it. And so
Yeah.
if we hope this to generate some workforce housing and not turn into Carmel, California, we have to be a little tolerant of not putting barriers up, because they're not like, they have margins.
That's why there's a lot of maze.
Yeah.
I still don't understand how that's a barrier, but okay, I'll let her go.
I'm sorry, Tom. Just know I fought valiantly. I tried. I tried. tried. And then cottages not facing the common courtyard or the street must have their main entrances facing a pedestrian path that is not directly excuse me, that is directly connected to the common courtyard. So basically their orientation has to have some connectivity in some way
So
to your paths.
on them, on that one with the 20 feet, I wonder if it should just be deleted, because of course you could put it within 20 feet. I mean, unless we're saying our preferred or suggested to, or in some way say that we would like this to happen. I mean, it seems to me like that should just go away.
So I agree with you. And when I quickly realized I was not going to win this battle, that was where my brain went. But here's why I think it's important to keep it in. I want people to know that the option is there, and it gives me a platform for a conversation when a developer comes in for a pre-application meeting where I can advocate for the community and encourage them to really think about a design that demonstrates that connectivity with the greater
Yeah.
community. If I take it out, I don't even get to have the conversation.
Right.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
that's
I go for that.
thank you. And then, okay, so common courtyard design standards. So this is basically the stuff we talked about and that Tom's had in his slides. I've got one more area I lost the battle I'll tell you about in just a minute here. But we got the 150 square feet per cottage of open space. Right, so we could have done less, but we agreed that was a big one for us. And this could have gone down, I believe, to 12 feet wide for the dimensional minimums for the size, for like the shape of the courtyard. And based on our conversations, keeping it at the 15, taking that larger dimensional standard. And then as you can see with the 75%, it is not to exceed. But if we wanted to say not to exceed 60% or not to exceed 50%, I would have to go through a pretty big analysis that they probably would not accept because the not to exceed is already there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we've seen these diagrams. Tom did a nice job brushing them up. So if it's more than 5 parking spaces, and we were like, what is the 4 feet for landscaping, right? We wanted to know what that meant. Because our parking space dimensions are 8 feet by 20 feet. That landscaping island is 4 feet wide by 20 feet deep. It is the entire length of a stall. Does that make sense to everybody?
Mhm.
When we weren't sure how to measure the 4 feet? Okay. And
I
then
note that the drawing you have there doesn't have the barrier between the next property over.
Yep.
Did that go away?
that's the other battle I lost.
Okay.
But I've got, just like the May for the street facing orientation, I've got some things I'm going to try to advocate for during pre-application meetings. I just can't require them to do it, but I'm going to do my best to advocate for those things. And then the community meeting buildings talked
Well,
about.
So,
Yep.
and the other piece we need to remember, just because we have allies in this, part of when we meet with people this summer, we need to tell them that this is all new ground. This is all, this is all cutting edge kind of stuff. And so people should not just engage now, but when there is going to be, or if they're thinking of turning their property into cottage clusters or whatever, the values outlined in the community plan of getting along with people and solving problems, et cetera, mean they should be weighing in with, they should be thinking about what they're going to do if they're going to develop their own cottage clusters. And if their neighbor's going to develop cottage clusters, they should be talking to them about quality,
Of life.
that it's in everyone's best interest, given that this is required, is to do a good job. And we know a lot about what a good job looks like now. It's not like year one, like in Portland, where people just said, oh my God, they're all going to be shoe boxes, blah, 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 blah. So I think it's incumbent on the community to take on some of the advocacy for quality beyond
Thank
what
you.
we're getting into the document.
I appreciate that. And anyone who like, so we have the initiatives of like the housing grant and some of the things that we've already started doing. And Tom, there's pieces of that that talk about landscaping and open space, and projects are ranked higher when they have those elements. Right. So they have landscaping designs. They are taking, you know, they are incorporating natural amenities and natural features of the property into the design. And those score really well. And that is another incentive for people who are looking for grant funding to incorporate that work. Parking design. Okay. So parking clusters, 4 feet of landscaping. So we just talked about that. So that's 4 feet by 20 feet. Parking areas may be covered. Off-street parking shall not be located within 10 feet of any property line except an alley. So this means you can't have cars butting right up to that adjacent property line. And then screening. So what it talks about in screening is landscaping, fencing, or walls at least 3 feet tall shall separate clustered parking areas of parking structures. It says from courtyards and public streets.
Oh,
So
there
this
you
is
go.
where it is in there, but what I would like to do is use that to take it a step further when we talk about adjacent properties as well. And then here's our here's some more of our garage and carport standards. And then our diagram. And then the provisions about existing dwellings. So if you have a property that already has a dwelling on it and they want to do a cottage cluster, and let's say put 3 cottages on there, because that's our minimum, right? So their property, if I owned a property in the Nesco R zone and I got a house, my property is over 20,000 square feet. I could go through a cottage cluster. I'd have to do 3 cottages because that's our minimum, right? Up to 8, but at least 3. And I could keep my house as part of that cluster development, even if it didn't meet the 900 square feet. It would count as a cottage, but it would not, but I would not have to.
So they would
alter
only
my
have to, so they'd only have to build 2 cottages in that case?
They could, but yes, they could. Absolutely. They could do 2, because then that would be a total of 3. Okay. So that's the document.
Well, that took us around 2 hours. I can't imagine how long the public meetings are going to be.
I streamline it, Randall, and I go
Yeah.
back to the concepts, right? So the documents will be posted, but it's going back really to the concepts and those community choices, and then the exercise with the maps and the lot areas.
Uh-huh.
Plus the highlighting of what's all, I think the huge thing is going to be, this is already on the books right now. Here's what's getting added. I mean, the way that's separated, I think will help us. So I think given all this, then Sarah, just because I think Nancy and the CAC needs to think about this, as I understand now, you go to DLCD. If we say this all looks fine with the changes we've discussed today, you take it to DLCD, or no, we go to these public meetings first?
So next steps. So the community, so there was that special meeting where the community voted on everything, right? So I think part of it is trying to figure out, with that being done, how we do this. I think because typically the vote happens after I make my presentation. But I think that what I appreciated about your guys' presentation, it was really good, and you did conceptually touch on the majority of these things. So I
Right.
think so I don't think, and that's what Mark and I were going to talk about this afternoon, is from a process standpoint, I don't think we've ran afoul. I think it was done just a little bit out of order, but in preparation for the hearings, what I could come back and do, okay, land use subcommittee did a fabulous job presenting all of these things to you. And so now I'm back to show you what those products look like, and let's have a conversation about it as we get ready to go to hearing. And then, because the public, the community still participates in the hearing proceedings. I don't,
Right.
so then we can talk about the process and next steps too.
The thing that concerns me a bit is that we've made a presentation with our preliminary recommendation. And a lot of those things got incorporated, some didn't. I think we owe it to our constituents to say, here's what didn't happen that we said we would
I
try to
agree.
make happen.
Yep. I was just going to ask you, Tom, what I would love the comparison of what is not in here based on what you have in your records for what the community wanted.
Well,
So are we
I can
talking about
try,
the
but that's
CAC
gonna
or
be
the
tough.
community? Which are we discussing?
The community, basically, the
The
NCAC
CAC.
voted to approve the preliminary recommendation.
Mhm.
Not all of those recommendations were accepted. And I think we should let them know that, yes, we heard you, but some of this stuff didn't fly.
Because it
Right.
couldn't, right?
So could I make a comment? I
Yep.
think that you're in good shape because it was very clear in the motion that was made at the meeting that this was an interim meeting and that there would be later meetings and later developments that would come along, that there was a perceived deadline, that something had to be done right away, and that there could be another special meeting called, not that wouldn't be so urgent. And it sounds like, Sarah, it would be just sometime before that July hearing, or is it
Yeah.
something so that it's not like it has to be done imminently, right?
No, I'm
Um,
not saying that, but I'm saying we do owe
mhm.
people that feedback.
Yes,
And I
absolutely,
think
Tom.
we could do that at a regular meeting. Just
Mhm.
briefly
Yeah.
say, here's the slides. I'm just going to go directly to the slides where things are not what we thought they were going to
That's
be.
true.
Or
Tom,
we
I
hoped they
think
would be.
that could be part of the presentation with me walking through the actual,
Okay,
like
that'd be
what's
good.
going to hearing and the map. Because I think the other thing where I think this is a good example of is, since the beginning, we talk about how these are living, breathing documents. They will continue to shift and change right up through hearing, right? I would say Nescowan's not so much, but like Oceanside and Neoconi are going to be very different. I mean, they want additional restrictions on single family dwellings.
Right.
Right. So their documents are really going to shift and change. But basically this isn't the beginning for us, but this is the beginning of the hearing process.
So one of the things we have to be careful, I'm just going to take us back, and this is important. I think, Tom, your point is we need to go back to the CAC and say these things didn't fly, and it looks like now we spent 2 hours going through it. Now we get it, and we think we're still in a strong position. But the other step that has to occur before July is, when I say the public meeting, I'm saying the CAC and others. It has to be the community. And so that is the 700 names we have, either from the
Email list.
that's the NCA. I don't know who's got that list, but
That's
that's the
the
piece you have that list?
That was generated by the NCAC.
Okay. So we need that community meeting, and given that it's late May, I think we need to get that on our calendar because that affects Sarah's participation. It affects meeting the standard of community involvement, which is all people in Nesco in the boundary. And I just want to talk about those logistics wherever you think it's appropriate, Rand, because I'm getting worried about time passing.
Yeah.
And there is the NCAC meeting, as Tom mentioned, on the June NCAC regular meeting, that this could be an agenda item for too. But Lynn, I guess I'm a little confused. The NCAC encompasses everybody within the NCAC boundary, up to 4 people within any given category per site, whether they're a resident, an owner, or a business owner. So really the
everyone-
community is the same.
Everyone is a
They are a
member?
member. Yeah, they're,
Because my
I mean, it's
neighbors-
nice if they register
No,
as a
see, that's
member,
what
but
our
we're trying to
responsibility.
get them to, we're
Right.
trying to get them to actually sign up to come, but
But
at
our
this point, we don't have a real registration. They don't have to pay.
Right. So our responsibility, though, is to communicate to the whole community whether they're in the NCAC or not.
Mhm.
And that's the piece I want to get on the docket. And what's the date of the June meeting? Is your agenda, Nancy, full for that June meeting, or could you, or is are you?
Well,
Is
that's up to Mark, but yeah, no, and Rand is on the executive board also as a subcommittee
Yeah,
chair. So
we're always on it in some form, whether it's just a verbal report or an exercise that we have to put together. You know, we're one of the critical parts of this. Bylaws and these meetings are kind of the main business.
What
of the
day is that
NCAC.
meeting?
it's the
June
second
14th?
Saturday. Yeah.
So the 14th?
I believe so.
So at our last
Yes.
meeting, we identified that as the release of the community plan. And so what we need to figure out is,
Which one's which? Yeah, what do we do?
there's the middle housing piece, and then there's the community plan, and then there's Tom, who has the community plan piece to prepare.
Right.
Well, the problem, well, we got sidetracked by the
Middle
middle
housing.
housing. We also got somewhat sidetracked by FEMA. That turned out to be a dead end. So the way I look at the document right now, it's not ready. I
Right.
don't know that it's going to be ready
And-
for that meeting.
I would like an opportunity to look at it before a public meeting, just because if there's something that we need to talk about, I'd like to be able to look at it.
We can
So-
look at it right now. I
Well-
pointed to.
I just canceled 2 meetings to stay on.
Yeah.
So I can't, and I do have a 5 o'clock.
I
No.
think
I can't
you-
cancel.
You need to set when that needs to be done, or when you think it can be done, and we all need to adhere to your deadlines.
I agree.
Well, the problem with me not being an expert is I can see that there are holes in things we said we would like to have. I don't know about anything that you haven't yet mentioned. So,
As far as the community plan or middle?
yeah,
Yeah,
as far as community plan.
yeah. And we
So-
didn't do our edits today, and we don't have another meeting before one of the well, we can just do the Mark's report at the NCA meeting. That's, I think, for
Yeah.
now, might have to do, and maybe we can announce some other things.
Okay,
We would like to edit the Lori's and input and any other input on the future goals piece as soon as we can. Oh, yes, Ted?
Brett, I'd like to advocate that you make a modification on the 100-foot setback for residential zone. So,
As part of one of our future goals.
yes, and I would suggest, if not eliminate it entirely, putting in the language that Pacific City and Oceanside has, which still retains the requirement to record a,
Declaratory statement.
yeah. So that's my input. And if Sarah can, I mean, Can Sarah clarify if that 100-foot setback comes from the state
It does
requirement?
not. It does
Okay,
not.
well,
Mm-mm.
that would have been helpful to know. So, so then that reinforces that I think a community input is appropriate then.
So,
So
I'm not an expert in that, so I need to have markup of how you want what changed. And either
I would just,
one of
I
the
would
committee
just,
members could get
yeah,
that, or
looking at
you can bring
the,
that.
looking at the low density standards for both Pacific City and Oceanside, they both have the same language.
so are you talking about the middle housing provision?
No, I'm talking about
No,
the
he's
100-foot.
talking about the
Okay.
100-foot resource zone setback. So if the community, so Tom, if the community just makes a note of that on a recommendation, I would, and if the community votes on that, then I would make that change and reflect it in all of those drafts you saw.
Okay, that, I can certainly do that in.
Yeah. Unless there's some community concern about that. I mean, I haven't been aware of it,
But I need specific language, though. You need to write me a paragraph.
okay, yeah. I can do
Okay,
that,
so
yeah.
let's,
I-
but thank you, Ted, but let's go back to the getting these two things launched and timing.
Okay.
Are we going to have a session where we go through and do final edits, or are we trying to finish this today?
We
Are we-
have a session scheduled for Monday. It's on the website, this committee at 2 p.m. on the 26th,
Yeah.
So we would
which
do
is
the edits
Memorial
then?
Day.
Oh,
It-
Nancy
it-
has some observation of some.
Well, I'm just wondering what the rush is for the community plan. I understand what the rush is for the middle housing, but for the community plan, is that something that has to be done right away? Because it seems
No.
like some thought, some more feedback sessions. These are meetings, these aren't feedback sessions. And to be able to offer these to I don't know, I just I guess I don't understand what the rush would be
I think it's less a question of rush and more a question of how long can this take and what can we do to make it a more, we've lost community interest because it's taken so long to get a document out to people, to be honest.
Yeah.
And the middle housing is a bright, shiny object that everyone's going to want to focus on, and we know that. But we need a timeline to finish the community plan because people can only commit so much time to paying attention to things. And summer is the time when the population of Nescoin is larger than usual. So it's a great time to wrap it up if we care about what people think. And I think we do. That's the whole point of a community plan. So to me, we've been at it for over a year. We have a draft that is, I think, very, very strong and this is the third or fourth time Tom has said, if you've got something to add, just write it down and get it to me and I'll put it in the draft. At some point, you have to stop drafting and you have to get a draft out for people to actually comment and respond to. And so finishing it, once we get people's response, we can finish it. I think we've all been thinking September is the finish line. August is a pretty tough month to get people to sit in meetings, but the goal is to have a plan so that people know to engage and win and to not abuse their time.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm searching for. I'm not saying it has to be next Monday or next whatever, but we got to land the plane. We're running out of fuel. And that makes it less valuable as a community plan. It becomes a group's plan.
No, I hear you. Certainly the community has been less active because we've had so many meetings with both of our committees, but hopefully our bylaws one is going to end here very shortly and then it'll be all you guys. So, but yeah, I guess I'd been sort of earmarking the end of the calendar year. So I was a little surprised to hear you guys talking so quickly. So it's certainly up to you guys.
So Sarah, what I didn't finish my statement. You can see it. I will start copying you on it. I just didn't want to fill up your inbox.
Yeah.
So when I make a new version, I'll just put you on the copy list.
Okay, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Tom. And I'm thinking maybe at some point you and I should put something on the calendar so that we can go through that together like we
Yeah.
did with the slides for the housing stuff.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, my role in that is just to make sure with the community plan updates, because I've not had an opportunity to be as engaged in those. I just want to make sure that your work is going in the direction that you want it to go in and that I can take forward to hearing. Right? Does that
Well,
make sense?
Yeah, it's still, in my estimation, it's still incomplete, but a lot of the bones are there.
Great.
So, and to that point, if it is till the end of the year and everyone wants to work to the end of the year, then I'd like us to define that when that work is now. Because I just, when deadlines just keep moving back and people stop coming to meetings and no one's giving Tom content, Lori did, Ran, you did. I mean, but we need to kind of box this in.
Yeah. Well, I think we need to keep editing these future goals. I think we just need to do our work at least every 2 weeks, but I would like to stay on this weekly thing until we have substance where there is substance lacking currently, and be able to review that enough so that we can present it intelligently when we have to go through this with the community. So those are we need to fill those gaps. Tom can point out where they are if we
Yeah,
can't
well,
recognize them.
if there's a heading and no text, that
It's
should tell you.
substance. Okay.
I actually have a question or just something for people to think about before the next meeting. When I put together those suggestions for page 13, which was what we called future goals, to
Yep.
me, I really wondered if the word goal was correct and if that was where they believe, because to me, they weren't really goals. They were like calls to action or actions that we can take on our own. They don't just have to be a goal. Like we could implement them tomorrow, whether the county likes it or not. I mean, they're just like, they're not ordinances. They're just like action items, like
Okay.
current action items. They're not the future. They're like today. And so I wanted everyone to think about, is future goals what we want the title of that section to be? Or is there really something else that we're trying to say there? And then the other thing was, I read through the value statements and I wondered, does this go in the value statements? Should this not be a separate thing? Should we expand on the value statements? And contrary to that, should we really go through each of the value statements and have something in that page 13 goals that reflects each of the values? Like, should we flesh out what the values say with a specific action item? Or it would.
That was my theory. I've put headings that are empty, are basically reflections of what the values were. And I figured if we have a value, we probably we have something that we either want to preserve or change. So and we used to call that direction, future directions. I'm not in love with any of those, but yes, we need to have something that says, this isn't something we're asking of the county, but this is something we're asking of ourselves, and we may ask other entities to help us with.
So
Yeah,
then that's separate from the section where there were headings that are empty that have to do with ordinances.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and they may remain empty. We may have nothing there. That's
Yeah.
okay. But we need to decide that there's nothing there.
but to your point, Lori, I mean, and I'm going to keep pounding on this till I get an answer. We have 2:00 meetings scheduled from the one we're in right now all the way to June 16th, every Monday. That is an exceptional time commitment to ask of people. It's huge. And we need to decide what we're going to have by the end of that time. Or if we're going to the end of the year, we need to back that off into a couple times a month. And Tom, to me, the work plan schedule about getting these edits in, I'm comfortable getting the document out to people now, as I said at the last meeting, with lots of gaps, because I think it's time they re-engage, and I think people need to pay attention, but they're not going to do that if we don't have a timeline or a deadline. They're just not. These are crazy times in the world. So I just think we should make a decision today, either that we're going to go to December or September, and when we have to get any content that's currently missing to Tom, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, the best way to get people to respond is to put something in front of them and give them a pencil. It is not to talk about what to do, the conversation is great, but it doesn't drive the product. And so I think we need to concur on a timeline, because I know Guy would like to go longer. I think Guy may have been on the same page of December. And I'm certainly going to finish, but I need to know what we're doing when to allocate this amount of time to something. So that's up to you guys to discuss and decide, but we need to land on that.
Well, just to be clear, I wrote down the ones that were important to me.
Yep.
I put something on paper, I sent it to Tom. So I'm good with going forward, but
Yep.
there's a lot of values there that were not addressed that I could see within the action items. They were more like fluffy thoughts.
And community plans, the action item, as Guy said at the beginning of this process years ago, ordinances are the action. And the community plans were not intended by LCDC to be the action. They were intended to be, these are the values we hold most dear. When you're making a decision about this land, please bounce it off this framework, and we will engage in the action steps as well. That's the way the system is designed. So, and again, I'm fine either way. We've got to kind of tie ourselves down. We have to commit.
Well, I think sooner the better, personally.
Yeah, it's not a year for me. It's my 5th year being involved in
Yeah,
this.
there's
Really
that.
ready to tie the bow. But
Yep.
I think I guess I still feel like, although it's a big commitment, the weekly meetings are productive. And if we wouldn't have had the middle housing thing, I think we would have gotten a lot done today. So
Yeah.
we're going to have to get that done next Monday. I mean, I guess it's Memorial Day, but that doesn't mean a lot to me, besides a couple of messages to people who were veterans or something that I do. Other than that, it's a work day for me. So if we can keep on the schedule, I think we're focusing on the edits or understanding what Lori's comments and other comments, where they go and what they mean. I really think that Nesco's at a point where it's, as it says in the plan, is getting into a little more self-fulfillment of getting ideas and following through and getting those things done ourselves through cooperation and working with government bodies, and actually seeing ways to get stuff accomplished that we thought somebody else was supposed to do. We're doing it ourselves.
Right.
Because
So Rand,
yes,
if that's the desire, then can we commit to, again, because we've got to get Sarah on our calendar, and we got to give her more than 2 weeks notice. If we have the community plan itself worked on the 26th, June 2nd, and June 9th, that's 3 2-hour meetings, that's 6 hours. What I had that we agreed to at our last meeting is we would have all edits to Tom on the 9th. Okay.
Seems reasonable.
And we would try to review a final at that time. Or maybe we want one more week to review the final, have that be the 16th.
I had it on my calendar that we were releasing the draft on the 9th, because that was before the community meeting.
Yes, but I heard, what I'm hearing today is we don't think we'll make that.
Okay.
But
Well,
speak
depends
up.
on what you give me.
yeah. No, I thought I went through the plan and I didn't see a lot of gaps, but
Well, I mean,
Maybe I'm not looking hard enough.
Well, one of the things I was looking at is, and I haven't done that, is look at the recommendations on page 13. A list of areas of recommendations include. All right, let me share that. Okay, I think I'm sharing that.
Yes,
If we've covered all of these sufficiently, then that's correct. But I don't know that we have talked about the sheriff and other safety protection. Locating the station, I'm not sure we have words along with that. So some of this stuff is, that's a place to look at. Do we have enough said about each one of these things?
yes. So
So Tom, if we generate in the next 3 weeks, I'm seeing 3 weeks here, 3 meetings, that's by the 9th. If we have all edits to you on the 9th, and we may have them all to you a week sooner than that,
I hope.
if
yeah.
we get that done, then how much time would you need to create the composite document?
Well, there's 2 steps. You give me the information, I integrate it, and then you review my integration,
Okay, so,
and then we would be ready to release.
okay, so if we get things to you on the 9th, and
Right,
then we
should-
review it
Before
on
the
the 16th,
Well, if you get it to me on the 9th, I'll have something for you by the 16th.
okay, and we have a meeting on our calendar on the website for the 16th. So that's the last schedule, what I will call intensive community plan document meeting. But does that sound doable to everyone?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
there's work to be done and we can do it in that time frame.
Okay. Then the question becomes, that's after your CAC meeting, Nancy. But when do we have the Sarah Community Forum to review the plan? Draft plan.
I cannot do the 14th.
No, that's okay.
Right, no. That's for the CAC.
After the
Yeah,
16th.
no.
So
Okay.
give us a date after the 16th that seems feasible for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you
To
want
have
to
a
do
meeting.
it, like, do you want to do virtual? Are we just gonna do Zoom only? Do you think that's the best way to do that?
I don't. I think we
Okay.
need to get people back in the room.
Okay.
We have
So,
our owl now. We're
okay,
self-contained with our owl.
I could do. Do you want to look at the golf course and tell me the availability for the last 2 weeks in June?
No, because I'll have it in my garage or at my house if we need to. Don't worry.
Okay.
But the golf course is crazy in June because that's when we make all the revenue for the year. So I think I'm not worried about finding a place because I'll host it if that helps. Do what your schedule, because you've got a crazy summer, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. And speaking of the buyout, litigation starts at the end of this month, so I'll be going to Portland for that.
Yep.
I would say the week of the 16th, I could do Monday night or Wednesday night. I think I can do the 21st if you wanted to do it on a Saturday. And then the week of the 23rd, right now, the only commitment I have is a hearing on the evening of June 26th.
So could we do so guys, what works for you the week of the 23rd? given what Sarah's just shared, because we
Yeah.
want to give ourselves a little extra time, Sarah, so we're ready.
Sure.
And
So
that
yeah,
this
the only-
involves getting a notice out to 700 people as well.
right. Yeah, so for me, the 26th is the only night that I have an engagement. I have a hearing, and that is, so just so you guys know, I will probably start working with the Planning Commission on section 5.120 on the 26th. Not for them, and I think it's going to take more than one session for them to look at that and go through it. But just to let you know, that's probably when I'm starting that. So if you wanted to meet earlier in the week, because I have the hearings, but part of those hearings are workshops just simply to go over the language. So
So
I
Sarah,
think
it's a lot.
the previous week, I think we should, if we're gonna try to do it this time frame, it shouldn't be that close to where you're occupied with other things, so. I
Right.
think we
I have
should get out of your
hearings.
way.
No, thank you. I
Yep.
have hearings every other Thursday, starting
Okay.
this Thursday night.
So-
So, yeah.
so Sarah, what happened to the 7 p.m. Tillamook County Planning Commission meeting on the Tuesday, the 24th, which we talked about at our last meeting?
Yeah, so that is posted on the website. So you can go watch that. That's where the consultant and I walked through the concepts.
Okay, so
So the
that's still
commission-
going.
That's
Okay.
still going. Yeah, so that was last month.
Okay.
Consultant and I did that presentation of all of the concepts. I gave an update of where I was at with all the communities. You can actually watch that. It's posted on the DCD website.
So Sarah, what availability do you have the week of June 30th?
Oh.
I start having a problem with that date. We need to be earlier than that, if you want
Yeah.
me.
What's wrong with Saturday, the 21st?
You give me the stuff, I'll get it out.
I think I can make that.
Okay.
I'm gonna
And can we
have to
do
confirm.
morning?
The morning would be great.
Great.
Yeah, I would prefer if we do a Saturday that we do it in the
Okay.
morning.
Okay.
So I'm gonna
And
put a hold here.
10 a.m. And we may end up at the fire hall or Michael's gallery or something that's nearby in a bigger room and see if we can get people in there.
Could I just mention that the farmer's market is often, they ask us to try to avoid meetings in the mornings
That's
during the
true.
farmer's
Yeah, I
market
think
season.
I appreciate that, but I think this is an exception. If we do it,
11:30 is that too late for you, Sarah?
No, I think I can make that work.
11:30 would get the early marketeers and otherwise,
yeah.
I think that's a reasonable thing to put it late morning.
Yep, I agree. I just thought if we pushed it later, as long as we can get Sarah, that gives the farmers market chance to get their morning crowd and their lunch crowd and
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy, for pointing that out.
Yeah, I forgot it's that time already too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nancy, would it be better if we did it after lunch? What's their peak?
All I know is that when we've been trying to schedule our meetings, they ask to have it like around 1 or after, but Ran has a better feel for that than I do, I'm sure.
No, my wife has a better idea of what should happen. And I can get her attention and ask, but I would suggest that be a good day. Hold on, she's on the premises here. Let me
In fact, we'll probably
just
change
run it
our
by her.
NCAC membership meeting. Last year, we changed the June meeting to be in the afternoon because of the farmer's market.
And I just don't want a bunch of crabby people because they haven't had lunch. So if we do it at 1,
Right.
Sarah, what
Yeah.
does that do to you?
I don't know yet. I'm figuring that out.
What time does the farmers market open? Is it 9?
Yes,
think
9. Yeah, I
9
believe
to
it's
2?
9.
What if we did an 8 o'clock Saturday meeting? Would that just
No.
people freak
Nope.
out?
Okay, I'm
Seemed to-
seeing, I'm gonna try to shift some things around that day to do an afternoon. So I'm just trying to figure out how, yeah, how about can we tentatively schedule that and then I'll let you guys know?
Absolutely.
So I'm just gonna put like 11:31-ish somewhere in there.
I'm gonna block my calendar from 11 to 3.
Their
Okay.
hours are 9 to 1.
Yeah, no, I talked to Lainey. She said 11:30 is reasonable for getting people to the market and getting people to the meeting.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So, and the latest version 15 has Lori's comments integrated, so all of us can take some time, to look at anything we would want to do, and we could, to protect suggestions, but also that list on page 13, we should do all of our extra effort to fill those in, so my confusion was kind of like, maybe some of these could be built into ordinances and maybe other things could be done with these besides these statements, but that's to be worked out in the next couple of weeks here.
Well, we have a.
Sarah's gotta go.
I have to go,
Yeah,
you guys.
thank
I
you,
cannot
Sarah.
miss this last meeting. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you all so much.
Okay,
Thank you.
Sarah. All right.
I'm going to take off to you guys. Thanks so much for everything you're doing.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Nancy.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah, I was supposed to be at someone's dinner at 5, but can we
I think we're
agree
about
to?
done.
Yeah, we still have some sorting out to do. So,
And Tom, I don't have any more edits. As I
Okay,
said last meeting, I like the document the way it is. I like the gaps. I don't, I know Guy wants to know why the action items didn't get done last time. It's a pretty significant list of things that didn't get done last time. And so my perspective is I want to hear what the community really thinks it's going to do or not do. And I think the document is compelling as it is. If you need help writing some fill-in narrative, I'm happy to do that. But to me, I like smaller documents with less stuff.
I would actually like to remove the things that didn't happen. It seems a little bit kind of petulant.
I don't think it's appropriate because quite honestly, we're an unincorporated area and no one followed up with the county, right? I mean, you can't do things that you don't have someone assigned to get them done. And the county hasn't had the resources to do anything for years now.
So can we have the agreement amongst those here that I can remove the pouting list?
It's
yeah.
I don't know, Guy
The
seems like
the
he
which
feels the
list?
strongest about that and he's not here.
Yeah, well, I can leave it in for now, but it just doesn't seem to go with the rest of the document.
I don't think I think if the community, if the CAC wants to send a letter to the county, independent of the community plan, and say, we're trying to get this community plan done, we're trying to understand what it can do. Can you just tell us why these things didn't happen last time? The county's going to be and keep it out of the plan. It's kind of a separate avenue of inquiry.
Excellent. I'll make it a separate document and we can process it that way.
Yeah.
Or not.
Yeah.
And Guy's on the planning commission. He is a planning commissioner, can say to the county better than any of us, independent of this effort, why didn't it get done?
Okay, that makes sense. Having it as preserving that knowledge of what didn't get done, and then yeah, okay, that works. I will do that. I will take it out of that document and I will make a separate document so we can have yet another document. Oh yay!
All right.
Okay,
I think we're done.
all right,
Yep.
so we're, we meeting next Monday, if everyone's okay with that. Is it
Yeah,
sacrilegious?
when is the NCA meeting? I thought that was on
This
Memorial
Saturday.
Day.
That's, no, the NCA meeting is Sunday at 4 at the fire hall.
Sunday at 4. Oh, okay, Sunday. Okay,
And Mark gave me comments to, I'll be speaking for the CAC because Mark is not here and Alex isn't here.
mhm.
So,
Okay.
Okay,
and, okay, well, thank you. We'll
thank you.
hopefully see you before, and then see you Monday as well.
Yep.
That works for everybody? Keep working?
Sure.
All
Yeah.
right. Thank
Thank
you all very
you.
much.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. I'll
Bye.
end the meeting.
Stop recording.